Okay, the time being 10:44, I'd like to call the meeting of the applicant review panel back to order. At this time, I'd like to welcome Pastor Trena Turner for her interview. Pastor Turner, can you hear us okay?
I hear you just fine. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning to you. I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Dawson for the standard 5 questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, I'm going to read you 5 standard questions that each of the applicants have been requested to address. Are you ready?
I am.
First question. What skills and attributes should all commissioners possess? What skills or competencies should the commission possess collectively? Of the skills, attributes, and competencies that each commissioner should possess, which do you possess? In summary, how will you contribute to the success of the commission?
Thank you. I think most important skill will be one of listening. A simple skill, but kind of complex, in that we need to ensure that we are paying full attention, not just to what we know, but what to others know, so that we are leaning in, not based on previous perspectives, but we are open to new ideas. So I think the individual skill as well as the collective skill is a desire, an appetite and passion to know more than what you currently know. And so I'd say listening is a huge skill.
Thank you. Question 2. Work on the commission requires members of different political backgrounds to work together. Since the 2010 commission was selected and formed, the American political conversation has become increasingly polarized, whether in the press, on social media, and even in our own families. What characteristics do you possess, and what characteristics should your fellow commissioners possess that will protect against hyperpartisanship? What will you do to ensure that the work of the commission is not seen as polarized or hyperpartisan, and avoid perceptions of political bias and conflict?
Yeah, this ties in for me the importance and the intentionality behind standing with just the one skill of listening. Of course, there are lots of skills that can be in place, but the polarization of our nation right now is such to the point where if we don't do something drastically different, I'm almost afraid of where we'll end up. People have dug into camps as opposed to remembering that people are people. And if indeed you have a love for those around you, then certainly there is a capacity to love those that are further away from you. Polarization. This particular role, people coming from different backgrounds, I think is great, because you for sure will have an understanding of why you believe what you believe. And always there are people behind understandings, people that come to mind that you believe you're representing, your family, your loved ones, people that are you've been in close proximity to. However, on this commission, having people that comes from certain camps, that's great. Again, with the ability to lean in and learn new things. So for example, the work that I do, and we'll talk about that later, but the work that I do requires that I step out of what I already know and be able to listen from a different perspective that may sound foreign and even offensive at its onset. However, at the core, people just do want to protect those that they hold dear. And the key is in helping them see that there are others that are just as dear as well. So the polarization, to me, only happens when we don't recognize that we really do have a greater capacity to embrace more than those that we have become familiar with and comfortable to. And that extends across every situation.
Question 3. What is the greatest problem the commission could encounter, and what actions would you take to avoid or respond to this problem?
One of the greatest, change is not easy for people. In human nature, it's not easy at all. The greatest problem would be for someone that digs in and refuses to receive new information, new insights. That just will, and so the difficulty is to even have patience with those individuals, because there usually is an approach that because of an exterior, because of initial words spoken that can make you want to shut down. And what you'd have to do is to kind of listen through the pain, listen through offense, listen through to first of all get to the place of, did I understand what your perspective is? Did I understand what you said? And it's like, I did understand you. Okay, let me stay in this long enough to see if I cannot then move you from where you are based on new information, or perhaps it's me that needs to hear new information and shift the thought. So the danger would be for those that shut down, have an unwillingness to move, unwillingness to receive new information, fact, testimony, etc., and not move beyond that.
Thank you. Question 4. If you are selected, you will be one of 14 members of the commission, which is charged with working together to create maps of the new districts. Please describe a situation where you had to work collaboratively with others on a project to achieve a common goal. Tell us the goal of the project, what your role in the group was, and how the group worked through any conflicts that arose. What lessons would you take from this group experience to the commission if selected?
The example that comes to mind has to do with when I was instrumental in merging the 5 organizations that I currently am now executive director over. So that's kind of skipping ahead to the end, but it didn't start out that certainly was not my intent. Back in 2015, 2016, I started doing work with grassroots organizing. Not at all my frame, coming from corporate world, and so was not very familiar with it, but was intrigued by the concept as I was introduced to it and drawn in. And quickly learned that of the 5 counties in the Central Valley, there were 5 separate entities doing work, and the culture and the way each of them operated was very different. And in trying to have conversations, so then I learned that the issues that they were fighting were very similar, but they were going about it in a very much of a different way. And there were those that felt they were stronger, more powerful, more affluent, influential and affluent. Those that they believed were kind of almost beneath them. And so yet in building together, certainly we would create and have more power. So in that, my role was at the time just one of the board members of a local one of the 5 organizations, but I was brand new coming in and didn't have all of the history and baggage concerned. And so beyond the personality issues, beyond people digging in and holding on to their own kind of belief processes, I really was looking at the bigger picture as I was just learning it, the importance of winning for more people, for a broader group of people, and being able to move policy, et cetera. So I started asking questions about why would we not merge. They told me it was something that they had talked about for, depending on who you ask, either 3 to 7 years. Well, it's like, well, let's not waste time talking about anything for those many years. Let's vet it and see if we can merge and if it's beneficial or not. And me coming in as a brand new person to the discussion and to the issues was actually wasn't as hard as you would imagine, but I came in asking questions, leaning in, trying to determine, is this legal? Can we merge 5 501c3s or not? And then what would be the benefit and what will it cost us to not do it? Let's look at the wins we're currently having. So I just started out by asking questions to determine why were people somewhat hesitant and why were there all of these false statements about why we couldn't merge. So let's just kind of work through them one by one and see what's real. And after doing that for about 4 or 5 months, meeting with the individual board members from the different counties, we decided to bring in legal representation to ensure that it can be done. And once we learned that we can do it, then we had to work with what all along was the real issue, the personal thought processes and the relinquishing of power and who would be in charge. That, of course, is always the issue. And so we worked through that. We determined that we were a body of people, no matter where we came from, that really was only serving to ensure that we were meeting the needs for the whole of the community, all of the communities in the Central Valley. And so brought the boards together with the legal representation. They agreed to merge after we addressed the situations. We had a founding convention, 2,000 people were there. We did merge, and after the merger, I was approached about leading the organization as executive director, which wasn't where I initially thought we were going. But through some prayer and just kind of reflection, I did accept that position. But that's my example of having people from different backgrounds. And although they were all organizing, they were very different in their approach and as far as who they felt were worthy of being represented.
Thank you. Question 5. A considerable amount of the Commission's work will involve meeting with people from all over California who come from very different backgrounds and a wide variety of perspectives. If you are selected as a commissioner, what skills and attributes will make you effective at interacting with people from different backgrounds and who have a variety of perspectives? What experiences have you had that will help you be effective at understanding and appreciating people in communities of different backgrounds and who have a variety of perspectives?
Yeah, I feel like this one is kind of almost the whole of my life. Working for the telephone company, all the iterations of it, Pacific Bell, Pacific Telephone, AT&T, SBC, all of those, I spent a great amount of that time in management, traveling, getting an opportunity to deal with people from different backgrounds. I did a lot of travel in that particular role. My role primarily, the most of that time, was teaching managers how to manage across. Before we merged, it was actually across in a couple of different states, and then eventually, based on the way the company shifted, was California. But even, I guess I more want to focus on the current work that I'm doing, both from pastoral perspective. Our congregation is pretty much about 70% African American, but there are others as well that are there from different backgrounds. And it's one of the, I think, few ministry congregations that have upfront conversations about race. Churches, for the most part, are very segregated, and without intentionality and leaning into those that are different, othered, they could be othered. People come and they go and they just don't stick. So we're starting to see a growth and spread there. And that's kind of narrow in the approach as far as different thought processes, because still, after all, they're coming from a faith perspective that's similar. But in the work of faith in the Valley, working with the elected officials, working with people in the community, because we are nonpartisan. Everyone that I interact with don't believe the way I do. They don't, they're not pulling for the same sort of outcome. And so I still get to respect and honor that. And it would be a mistake to think that through every conversation, you're going to get to the end and everyone's like, oh, I see. Yes, let's just work for the same thing. That's not what happens sometimes. Sometimes people will have all of the facts on the table. They'll hear all of what should happen, and we are really good on bringing in testimony from different backgrounds, and there still then is a determination. Usually there just is something that we have not gotten at yet to be able to determine why are you lifting one group or individual over another. And sometimes you can get to that. Sometimes people won't have enough trust for you to let you know what that core issue is again. So for me, it's the work that I do. I did through the company, the church, Faith in the Valley. I've ran into people. There are people that, because I wear a title of pastor, that I think I put them off coming in. It's kind of like, I know you're not going to appreciate me and where I come from. And so I then do my best to overcompensate for that, to ensure them that even though I have my own personal beliefs, I also believe that people get to live life the way that they, not to be so mysterious and vague. Barcelona last year, Borealis and Estrella Foundation, they work heavily for trans, gay, lesbian individuals, and they invited me into this space. And when I got there, I think all of the participants were surprised that me, Black, cisgendered female, was in this space, and everyone was prepared for me, I guess, to judge them or not receive them based on experiences and what have you. However, it was a very fruitful and rich, rewarding experience beyond the content of what we were there to do. which was work on the overcriminalization of people of color. Beyond that, I think there were some life changes and adjustments that made from the perspective of who's seen as valued. And I think I was able to represent a group of individuals that had received rejection, and before, out of what they categorized me as the church, and they had been rejected from such. And they were like, maybe I have overgeneralized the church because you seem to be receptive. Now, most of what I was there for had nothing to do with that. It just is an example of me not holding any set belief about any person. I think every person has value and should be well represented. And it's an example of me leaning in to see what someone different than me would desire and need, and be able to represent them fully in their humanity.
Thank you. We will now go to panel questions. Each panel member will have 20 minutes to ask his or her questions. We'll start with the chair, Mr. Coe.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Good morning again to you, Pastor Turner. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Good morning.
So your application lists quite a few community efforts, including a VIP community development center that serves the community of all ages, working with Californians for Safety and Justice, facilitating leadership trainings for the Boys and Girls Club, First Five, and others. Recruiting people to participate in the annual Stockton Reads program. There's a lot more here. My question is, what motivates you to be so involved in your community in these ways?
Well, I love, cliche answer. I love people. I have, because of now, I have more time to actually direct the things that I love to do. Not time that I'm not busy. There's a lot going on always, but now I get to be I get to direct which programs I want to work in. And for us, my husband and I, the CDC is part of our ministry. It's a segment of it. And so for the Stockton area, I haven't been here that long, but the people here, I don't know, I think I've had experience and exposure to things that sometimes seem different than what the people that I'm around have had. And so I'm doing now a reading program in our shut-in space, both for adults, 2-hour reading to adults, and then also for children bedtime stories in a community reads program. I didn't start it, I just volunteered to participate in it. I think people are hungry for someone that will see them spend time and recognize the gift that they are, and so anything that I can bring to that, I think I walk away richer because of it. So it fills me with just joy to be able to work with people, and also those that are considered challenges by others. I like to see when people change, when they have a new experience and they walk away a little different.
Thank you. You also mentioned in your application that you've received community honors from the NAACP and the Amelia Ann Adams Whole Life Center Bridge Award. Were you awarded these honors for something specific or for overall involvement in the community?
Let's see, NAACP was, I think, overall work in the community, for sure, just for some of the same things that you read, et cetera. For the Amelia Ann Adams program, she's deceased. And so that award is done in her honor. And she's actually the one that brought me into social justice work. Of course, I went to school and read like all of us have, but it never stuck. Social justice never stuck for me, I think, with all my years of corporate work. And so coming into Stockton, moving here, starting to do ministry work, I think that we represented something different. So when Pastor Amelia initially approached us, it was because of work that we were already doing in the community, and she had not quite seen anything like it in the Central Valley. The way that we do work multiculturally, the CDC that's open, the reading programs, all of that is a little bit of a different frame for some of the churches in this particular area of the Central Valley. And so that award had more to do with innovation bringing freshness, newness, programs to the Stockton area specifically.
Great, thank you. I'd like to move on to your essay on impartiality for a moment. And in that essay, you say that impartiality is one of those things better spoken about by a third party. It is something best said about you rather than something you say about yourself. And in your letters of recommendation and in many public comments to your application, other people do indeed speak very favorably to your ability to be impartial. Why do you think that other people view you as impartial? What is it you think you've done in your life to make you to make other people view you this way?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. I think that you can easily be deceived, and the thing about this deception is you don't really know it, right? And you can easily be deceived about yourself when you make absolutes about I always and I never, etc. And I'm always cautious about that, and I love it. And I was really blessed by reading some of the comments that came. It really made me feel good that my desire was being seen as such. I think it's because I try to come into any conversation. I always bring what I know, but I always try to come into a conversation, Mr. Cole, listening for what others know. And now I can't come with a set knowledge and receive new knowledge and walk away the same, right? Nothing works like that. It shouldn't. And so I love listening to people, hearing their perspective, and then kind of testing or checking, seeing what do I need to adjust based on this encounter, based on what I've learned, et cetera. And then how do I carry the gift that I've been given? How do I carry that with me when I walk away and not pretend like it never occurred? And so I think conversations are gifts. I think experiences are gifts. This experience is something that prior to last year, I hate to tell you, I didn't know anything about a redistricting committee, which made me determined to want to lean into it more and to study and to make this attempt, because I believe that when you learn information, when you've been exposed to something, that you should carry it and treat it. And I've shared it with so many different people, regardless of where we go with this. I've shared it with so many different people just because so people are aware of it. So I think people, when I give them the best that I have, I think they respond in kind and give me their best.
Thank you. In your very first essay, you say, we embrace diversity when we have a desire and a capacity with demonstrated actions to learn from others, gaining a clear picture of what our collective needs may be in a way that brings value to all. And you've kind of said some similar things this morning. Can you give us some examples of the demonstrated actions that you're referring to here?
Mr. Cole, say it again, because I don't have it in front of me. I heard you say demonstrated actions, but I want to make sure I'm demonstrating exactly the point you're talking about.
Yeah, the excerpt from your essay that I quoted was, we embrace diversity when we have a desire and a capacity with demonstrated actions to learn from others, gaining a clearer picture of what our collective needs may be in a way that brings value to all. And so my question was, can you give us some examples of the demonstrated actions that you're referring to?
Yeah. We went, this is simple, but we went, my husband and I went, there was an open house after one of the bombings of the Islamic centers and stuff. And here locally, there is a center that I had never visited or been. And even though we represent people from the Muslim and the Sikh communities, et cetera, I'd never been to this particular place. But they made an open invitation to everyone, kind of to remove that fear that people typically would have. And I told my husband, we've got to go, because I did not want them to do an open invitation and no one show up. And so that's another, I guess, way of thinking I have about myself. I always want to be the one to try and represent. Well, then let's not just think someone else should do it, you go. So we went. And of course, if you've ever been to a temple, they separate the center, they separate the males and females and what have you. Well, when I went, I am aware that there is a head covering that they wear. And so when I went, I had one in my purse, and I didn't even think to talk to my husband about it one way or the other. We went to the event, we went in, we went our separate ways, and we did our tour and what have you. And at the space where they pray, I noticed the other women were putting on their scarves, and I had to follow their lead because I didn't have a lot of knowledge in it one way or the other than to say that the hair covering is important. And so when they pulled theirs out, I pulled it out, and mine's out, and I watched very carefully and tied it the way that the others were. Some had it on the whole time. Anyway, and so we went in and we did the prayer and, took the shoes off, the whole bit. And when we came out, I didn't remove it because those that wear them all the time, of course, kept them on, and the others had them on. So when I came out, my husband he did a little double take, like, what? So he was surprised because he didn't know. But by the same token, in the kind of reception period, I'm not certain if that's what they call it, but the reception period where they had the different foods and what have you. And I'm really ticky, Mr. Cole, about trying different things, but I would rather try something that I never would eat at home than offend someone. So I was eating the different things that I don't know what it was. And one of the ladies, she says, "Oh, you're Muslim, right?" And I was like, "Oh no," she kind of looked like, "You sure?" Because you had the hairdress. For me, that's the point. That's the demonstrated. It's not the big announced, "Oh, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other for the people." Do what you know to do. And then when you learn more, do more, but try to fit in. My goal was not to mock, not to pretend, but to honor what they respected and to try and show them that you opened your home to me. I want to be a great guest in your home, and I want to learn in the process.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about something that you mentioned a couple of times before, and that's leaning in and really understanding what other people are saying. And I'm trying to actively not lean in so that my head isn't too big in this screen here right now. But how do you actively demonstrate to another person that you are open and interested to the things that they find important?
Mm-hmm. You don't have to be an excellent communicator to have great value and excellent points. And many people aren't great communicators. So the first thing they say may not even be what they mean or intend. And I think what happens frequently is things are stated and said either out of frustration or, just, feeling of not being heard. And it's said the first time, and then people are offended by it, or they're put off by it, or it wasn't, something that they found value in, an end of conversation. And what I like to do, particularly if something strikes me odd or different, is to just kind of, and I mean lean in. My head may look big too, but really do kind of lean in and say, tell me more. Tell me more about that, which is kind of my go-to for, I really want to say, what? Right? And it's like, tell me more about that, which gets them then to maybe say a little bit more. And sometimes you might be surprised that people, when you say, tell me more, they kind of like step back, like, you really want to know, because we move so fast in our society. We really don't get to the depths of conversation frequently that we need to. So tell me more just basically says, no, I do value what you're saying and I want to understand, and I don't want to just react to your first thing. I mentioned a couple of times about words and conversations being gifts. People will give you based on how valued they feel, right? So if I don't feel like you're really listening anyway, I'm gonna give you short answers. Response, how are you doing? I'm great. Are you? Good. Tell me more. What? And then it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm not so great, right? Maybe there was more I wanted to have in this conversation. And so the leaning in to me is not thinking so much about what do I need to do in another 20 minutes or 30 minutes. This moment won't repeat. Let me get all of it out of this moment that I'm in.
So part of the reason that I asked about that was that one of the tasks in front of the commission is going to be identifying communities of interest all across the state. And a lot of that identification, there's going to be some data aspects, but a lot of it's going to be listening to the perspectives of the people in those communities and what they find important. So my question is kind of twofold. Is one, well, some of those communities are easier to find. Some of them are a little harder to find people that aren't engaged for one reason or another. So how would, as a commissioner, you go about identifying communities of interest, particularly trying to pay attention to inadvertently maybe overlooking some of those harder to identify communities?
Mm-hmm. Mhm. I a couple of things. You have to be willing to be. It's kind of almost like that. I don't know if it's called Samoa. Or some I don't know what I was eating at that place, but it's almost akin to that. You have to be willing to go places you typically would not go, physically, and in the moment, in the conversation, kind of exploring, etc. You have to be willing to be with people and around people that you typically wouldn't. I don't know how much time I have, but there's an amazing story later I maybe can tell you. But there was a gentleman, his name was Frankie. He was a Latino gentleman, big, booming guy, right? He was had mental challenges. He was and but he loved me and my husband. And make a long he was very brash. He was had some issues. He looked at the young girls kind of the wrong way, and he had a lot of kind of issues around him. But we also knew that he had some mental challenges or what have you. Long story later, but for right now, let your mind wander, all of those things. And he was around the church a lot because he loved being there, but he had no background, no social graces. And Frankie had a birthday party, and he invited all the church too, and we knew all the church wasn't going to go, right? And but for sure, I could not imagine him, even Frankie, having his big 40th, I think it was back then, party, and no one show up. We did. We went, my husband and I, but there were about 5 or 6 people that were there. The 5 or 6 people were all people that were probably from Frankie's community, if you would. And they were all shocked as all get out that he really had someone that showed up to his party. We went there, Mr. Cole, they barbecued on a dirty grill with their hands dirty. The meat wasn't clean. They opened chicken out of a package that was thawed out in the sun. And all the while it was like, ooh. And so, but they were like, oh, Mrs. Turner, Pastor Turner. They were like over the moon excited, right? And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I'm praying. And to make it worse, I had my 2-year-old grandson with me. And I'm like, Jesus, this is more than I can do. But I was determined. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to be there for his people. You see, I'm alive and well and didn't die from it or any of those other things. But that was huge for him and for those 5 or 6 individuals. That was just for 5 or 6 people that no one else pays attention to, people that people, push aside. I think that you have to be willing to, because people aren't going to just come to you. Frankie came by some miracle, but his friends wouldn't. And so I think the commission, it's important for us to recognize that anytime I try to make myself as regular, normal as possible, but there are people that I'm amazed at that'll be like, I was so scared to talk to you, Pastor Trena. I didn't want to talk. And I'm like, I'm blown away by that. I'm like, why? I'm just me. I really do want to hear from you. I think people in the community, when we're trying to listen to testimony to try to make decisions and determinations, we need to make them as comfortable as possible. Number one, so that they can share their truth and know that we're willing to go where we need to be able to hear the stories so that we're doing the right job and a good job at representation.
So you touched on a point I wanted to make regarding those communities that maybe have a lack of comfort for one reason or another in engaging, particularly in government or authority. But since perspective of as many communities and as many people as possible is important for the commission to do its best work, how do you make them feel comfortable enough to come forward? Because in some of the examples you've given, you've talked about how you've gone to them, but in the work of the commission, at least the way they did it 10 years ago, you're having to get the people to come to you to some type of meeting. How do you get them to feel comfortable enough to come and speak and share their perspectives with the commission?
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes remaining.
Thank you.
Normalizing as much as possible. I love the approach that you all are going through to ensure that you have diversity represented. I think everyone can't sit with suits and ties and look so polished and poshed and all what have you. I think people will see that as another body of government that they won't approach. I think it's the regular language, it's the shifting in language, being able to use terminology that is normal, natural, accepted by all. It could be videos, it could be public service announcements, social media for sure, making sure that people, because it's some of the things that we use now. I'm just trying to ensure that through the 6 degrees of separation, that we are reaching people and they're saying, no, this commission you do want to approach and you do want to speak with.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, one more time check, please.
2 minutes remaining.
2 minutes, thank you. Pastor Turner, I'd like to ask you, if you were to be appointed to the commission, which aspects of the role do you think that you would enjoy the most? And conversely, which aspects of that role do you think you might perhaps struggle with a little bit?
I would love the meeting the people. That hands down, that would be great. And I would enjoy the challenge of hearing different perspectives and trying to ensure that I'm still holding them in value and in respect. The ones that I would find challenging, I don't know, it's not my forte. Numbers, figures, those kinds of things. You saw my records and stuff. I have ability to understand all of it, but it's not where I like to hang out. And so that for me would be like, eat your peas, right? Peas being synonymous for something I hate. Can do it, not my favorite.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Ms. Dickinson.
Thank you.
Good morning, Pastor
Good morning.
Trena, right?
Yes, good morning.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of go a little further on one of Mr. Koh's questions. And he was talking about communities of interest, and something that stood out to me in your essay on diversity. You were talking about ensuring inclusivity at meetings and planning, and you always ask who's not at the decision-making table. How would you determine who's not at the table or who's not being represented when you're looking at communities of interest in each of the areas of the state?
I would go about it. Thank you for the question. I would go about it similar. A couple of days ago, even on my team, we're looking at perhaps a restructuring and what have you. And we were doing some visioning meetings because of the time that we're in. How do we not go back to a normal? How do we move beyond? And so we were talking about who needs to be a part of this meeting, right? And they were like, let's bring in this person, that person. Well, the more people you get in, the more opinions. You may not move as quickly as you'd want to. Not that that's always the best thing. But we started with a question that says, who's here? And I don't mean that, I can look around at the screen and say, oh, Mrs. Dixon is here and the legal rep and Chris is on and all. Not that who's here. Who do you represent? Who are you, right? And so it gives an opportunity to say, well, when I'm an older, Black, cis, female, gendered, I'm a pastor, I'm here, because those are the things that my natural things that I'll hold. And then when you do that around the table, you'll learn that someone else is there because they are an immigrant. Someone is there because of all of the different things. Because of the easy answer is go get all the people and have them represented, right? But that's not always the luxury that we have. And so you start with who are you that's there? Honestly, what groups can you hold what groups can you hold? What groups can you represent? And once you name that, then you begin to see where are the gaps of who's not at the table. Now, do I have an opportunity to bring that group in to the table with me? Can I go get them? Or now do I need to do the research or the interviews or the reaching out to ensure that I'm holding them at the table in their perspective, even if they're absent?
Okay, thank you. You spoke about individuals that might represent various groups. Something that the last commission noted was that in some of their interactions, they suspected that there were individuals that were representing themselves as members of communities, when in reality, they probably were not. They were probably looking to further their own agenda. What do you think the commission can do to guard against that type of thing this time around?
And the guard against would be the perception or guard against that happening? Because I don't guard against communities being represented by somebody that doesn't have their best interest at heart, or is using the community to further their own agenda. Yeah. I think it's the deep questioning and challenging of who's there and why, and not the assumption. The thing that I have to say, Ms. Dixon, that keeps coming to my mind, so I'll say it so I can quit tripping up over it in here. When I first started doing work in community involvement, of course I'm Black all day long, been Black, right? So in being in one of the groups, they were having a discussion, I remember distinctly, about interactions with police. And they were going back and forth, and I couldn't quite understand it, right? And so finally, because the way the discussion was going, there was finally an agreement where the police union or whoever it was agreed to meet with the people at a Starbucks, and they were just going ballistics. And I'm thinking, what in the world is wrong with these people? They just cannot be satisfied, right? And then finally, someone turned to me and they said, because we don't go to no effing Starbucks, right? And I was like, whoa, okay. So now here's my point. If I were chosen to represent Black people, I would have been in a meeting saying, this is beautiful. Yes, let's meet at Starbucks. Let's go do it, right? Not recognizing that I was not representing them well because I didn't represent that segment of community, where they came from and what their realities were one way or the other. So your question makes me think of that in the manner that says it has to be deep, not just who you're presenting as, but what are your experiences? Who are you surrounded with, and what have you been exposed to be able to answer that question? Other than that, we'll just categorize people. Oh, I see a white male, look conservative in a suit, he's going to represent this group, this people. And it's not as simple as that. I think it requires interrogation to know not just who's presenting, but who are you really carrying with you when you show up.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Another thing that you talked about in your impartiality essay, you talked about that you do your best to be impartial and you listen to feedback from others. And as you learn better, you make adjustments, when and where those adjustments are needed. Could you give us an example of a time where, as a result of feedback, you made an adjustment that improved your impartiality going forward?
Yeah, I can. Early on in the work, we were talking a lot about sanctuary, and this had to do with immigrants. And we were looking at, first of all, faith spaces, temples, mosques, churches, places that would serve as a sanctuary for immigrants. And because we have a church as well, I was thinking, oh, maybe Victory and Praise. I wonder, could we be a sanctuary? Well, in the conversations, and then it started, it kind of moved into, we also have immigrants, right, that could be same-sex, what have you, partners. And then I was like, oh, I don't know if that'll fly in my community, because personally, that's not necessarily what we teach or whatever. And so I'm like, oh, that might be wonder what that's I don't know, maybe I won't say Victory and Praise. Well, in one of the events, one of the individuals that worked for me actually now, and we were having a conversation, and I'm thinking, well, we probably could, and I didn't name our congregation, thank the Lord, I was spared from that. But I said, there are probably spaces that would be sanctuary, but they would probably need to make sure they were married or they were not this. And she went off about those sanctuaries that would think that would weigh in people's lives over their sexual preference or what have you. And as she was talking, first of all, I was like kind of taken aback, and I wanted initially to argue it by saying, wait a minute, these are their places. They can think the way they want to think. And it was like, Trena, do what you always talk about, listen, right? And so she went deeply about what this would cost people if they were being deported and if they'd been in this area for a long time. And, after I finished listening, I'm thinking, wow, how do I adjust for that? What do I think? Because this isn't about me trying to proselytize someone. It's not about me this is about saving lives, So the shift in me, number one, I could have just never asked the question and said, we're not going to ever be sanctuary. And then even when she gave her perspective, I could have dug in to but the work that I do, I'm not there for my personal beliefs. I get to hold whatever they are, but I also get to fully represent all of the other people. And so I was appreciative of her, glad for the wisdom, because being the boss, I didn't never want to come across like that, but I was glad for the wisdom in just naming some, because I recognized there were others like it. But I walked away from it having learned that without the challenge, I never would have tried to wrestle with what was more important, people's lives or a personal belief, as far as, because it really had nothing to do with the ability to give the building, right?
Thank you. So you mentioned doing a lot of traveling on your role as with AT&T, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
How much knowledge do you have of the far northern part of the state or the far southern part of the state?
How much knowledge? Can you help me quantify that? What do you want me to say? How much knowledge? Lots.
What do you know about any communities in those areas, or how being located in those areas might affect their needs or what they're looking for representation?
That's interesting. Well, I do know one of the Terry Supahan on my team. He's another one, well, not my team personally, but he's one of my one of the other executive directors in the network. He works in True North, and they have spaces where he was looking forward to having some of the census group come out, because he was explaining how they literally had to get on a boat and cross across the river and go up, whatever. It was a very difficult space to get to. So I know that there presents a lot of challenges where he is in True North. But other than that, the geographic challenges are spread out in some of the areas. I know that for us in the Central Valley, with a lot of the migrant communities, there's issues. I know Southern California somewhat. Never really thought about it in my travels. And my travels with ATT was always, jump on a plane, grab a cab, get to the buildings, right? So that would be a little bit different. So I don't really know how to answer from a challenge of geography as far as me getting to them.
Thank you. Can I get a time check, please?
Yes, there are 9 minutes, 14 seconds remaining.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at my notes to make sure all my questions have already been answered. So one of the ways that the commission is selected, the first 8 commissioners are selected randomly, and then they are tasked with selecting the next 6. If you're selected as one of the first 8, what would you be looking for in those other 6 commissioners?
I would be looking for someone for sure that's different than me. But also flexible and open to, back to the listening again, and showing a willingness to receive new information and make adjustments. I'd be looking for someone that is farthest away from what I represent. I feel pretty strongly about my beliefs and strongly about what I've presented for you today. But I know that that's not, everyone doesn't come from that same perspective. And so it would be easier. I wouldn't have to stretch me later to represent a group of people if we could find that on the commission. And then that helps us be able to relate to people that we meet across the state.
Thank you. What would you ultimately like to see the commission accomplish?
Ultimately, I would love for the commission to come in their full selves, first of all, so that we know who we're dealing with, know what to expect. And what I mean by that is I sit on a board that have some diverse opinions, but I've sat with them long enough to where even when they're not present, I'm able to say, well, if Justin was here, this is what he'd be saying, even if it's different than what I want to happen. Because of the just the valuing of the difference of opinion, we can learn to represent each other to ensure that we come out. Because the bottom line, what you want is not to come out with my thought process. You want to come out with what's best for the end game, right? So in this case, for the state of California. So I would hope that we'd end up with a commission that has the same kind of, first of all, coming with their true self, no hidden agendas. This is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is what I'm strong in. So because of the areas I'm strong in, you have that. If this is an area that is not my first strong suit, well then let me kind of step back, you lead in that area, and I'm gonna pick, because I don't think anybody has to be great at everything, but let's be real clear on what we can do and not set us up for failure by pretending. So pretenses doesn't get us anywhere. So I would love a commission that would trust each other enough to be open, vulnerable, and let us know who we're dealing with, and I think we can build anything from there.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, I don't have any further questions at this time, so I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Dickinson. Mr. Belknap, the time is now yours.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Pastor Trena.
Good morning.
So you worked at AT&T for 25 years. What were your various roles at AT&T?
Okay. Ooh, I moved a lot. So I started out, believe it or not, as a TSPS operator, and it was a first year away from the old cord boards. And so I did that until I almost got fired for falling asleep doing the job. But my boss saw me doing the job while I was asleep, so that actually got me a promotion out of there. So from there, I spent a short amount of time as a service representative in residence. I was promoted from there into San Francisco, working with some of the data lines, tracing lines, trunks, those kinds of things. And then I went into management, leading special projects. I ended up working a while in methods and procedures. I had moved into second level management, into the training department, teaching managers how to manage. So not so much in the product side of it, but on personnel side. From there, I ran call centers for a great amount of time. And as associate director, my second level managers basically just taught them how to run call centers. So that's kind of the journey, the quick pace.
So in what role at AT&T were you most satisfied and most having the most joy in your job?
Oh, I skipped one. I sung for the telephone company for a while. They made up a position for me to just run the management programs and come out and sing. Unheard of. You won't find that I had to apply for. The thing I think that gave me what I loved the most, I tend to like places I am. I think the thing I loved the most was probably as a associate director, helping second level managers know how to run their call centers. It was a challenge. I was there for I don't know, I think we were ATT at the time. I was there when we did all the cease and desist and all of that whole sales scandal stuff that was going on. That was probably the darkest time. But the challenge in that was getting people to be able to sell, teach their individuals how to sell in integrity, even though that was very real. There were lots of pressure to sell in ways that were basically deceptive. But the good part about it did get to be a challenge to say, you know what, this is really a good product. It really is a good product. You got to be darn good at what you do to keep up with those that are putting things on that's not real, because that internally that got to be the competition. Was not to how you would excel in your job. The competition got to be how do you sell and do a great job, and people actually know what they're receiving while you're being compared against those that's not. And so my role, I got an opportunity to counsel, coach, train a group of individuals that was determined to do it the right way. And we really did have a good time with that in spite of all of the trauma.
All right, thank you. What skills did you develop at AT&T that you would bring to your work as a commissioner?
At AT&T, that was some years ago too. Probably communication was one. AT&T was masterful in their trainings, in their customer service trainings, in their presentations, facilitation skills. All of that really came from AT&T training.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things you emphasized in your response to question 1 was that the skill that commissioners need to have is the ability to listen. That was the focus of your answer, and I could acknowledge that is probably one of the most important skills, but there's probably others. So So what other skills should the commissioners either have individually or collectively?
Yeah, there would need to be the ability to analyze data, communication, written skills are important. They would need skills of, let's see, so that's what comes to my mind for written skills, analytical skills. I'm drawing a blank. That's all I'm thinking about right now.
Okay. So I think your experiences that you've written about in your application that you described today demonstrate your ability to listen to communities. Of the other skills, that analyzing data, written skills, what else do you bring to the collective pool of skill set for the commission?
One of with the analysis and data that's presented, I think that it can get so wonky that people turn away from it. I have ability, and it's amazing. I wouldn't be able to necessarily spell it out for you, but to look at data, look at something that is written and reworded. Coming into this current job that I have, there's one gentleman, his name is Joseph McKellar. He is masterful in how he writes. But I tell you, everything he writes, I have to read it like 2 or 3 times. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? No one, Joseph, is going to love you enough to read this 2 and 3 times. And I'm like, who are you writing this to? And so Joseph does a lot of work with the Catholic diocese and what have you. And he and I had an opportunity to actually meet Pope Francis and be in a close session with him in the World Meeting of Popular Movements a couple years back. And that's how he writes. He writes like he's writing to, the Pope and, a whole bunch of, unlike Joseph, we just don't, that was amazing. We did that. We followed up. He went back a different year through the World Meeting of Popular Movements, but that's not our audience. And so, and he says, well, Pastor Trena, they need to know this, 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 and this. And I'm like, okay, I got that. Number one, I had to read it a couple of times to see what you're really saying. But that 3-page document, try this on, right? And I'll give him something that may be a page long. It's the plain English. For the most part, people read at about an 8th grade level, right? And he's writing easily, like college level, whatever. There's a place for that. But if we're reading if we're using the data to actually want people to understand it and read it, we have to be able to speak plainly and clearly. And I like to reword things. I'll tell you something else, period. Run on sometimes, that's a period. Now, I'll tell you something else. One of the other jobs, unnamed jobs, that I had at AT&T, and when I say unnamed, they would hire me just because they wanted me to be there, and there wasn't necessarily, they'd make up a position or what have you. One of them was there was a problem between the computer programmers. There was a problem between the computer programmers and marketing, and they could not get along at all. Everything was an issue. It was causing delays in productivity and everything else. And I would go in and listen to programmers say what they need, and listen to marketing say why it couldn't happen. And after I listened to, and I'm not my husband's a computer programmer by trade. I'm not, and we certainly don't talk about computer programming. But I would listen to them for a while and be able to say, wait a minute, if you need load live, and I didn't even know the words I'm saying, right? But I heard the patterns of speech of what they're talking about. If this is what has to happen, then are you asking for this? And I'd say a couple of different things, and they'd be like, oh my God, yes, this is what we need, right? It's a different kind of analysis. It's a different kind of being able to take information and have it translate across to someone else. And I actually did that for a while, and I still do that in different scenarios where people are at odds, and what they're really doing is talking on different levels. And I don't mean intelligence, I mean just different. They're talking in a different almost coding. And if you, again, back to that, and I hate for it to be overused, but if for me at least, I feel like it's almost an interpretation of languages or translation, and being able to sit in and saying, wait a minute, you guys are dug in, but this is what you're asking for, and this is not what you have an aversion to. And so being able to relay it again, then it's like, yeah, that's what I want, right? And then we can put it down and move forward with it. So that's a unique, I think, ability that I have and a skill set that won't fall into a normal category that I provide.
All right, thank you. So, Faith in the Valley, that was a merger of 5 different nonprofits or 5 different groups.
Yeah.
Can you, you might have said it in the application, but I don't remember. What were the 5 groups that came together into one?
Mm-hmm. They were all similar groups with different levels of ability and strength and money. But one was in Bakersfield, our Kern County chapter. There was Bakersfield, which was Faith. They were called Faith in Action. There was the Fresno, which was Faith in Community, Fresno County. Merced was called, what was Merced called? I'll come back to them. I forget what Merced was called before. Stanislaus County, and then San Joaquin County. San Joaquin County was packed, people acting in community together. I'm not going to think of what Stanislaus' previous name was, and Merced, for whatever reason, is not coming to me. But those were the 5 counties.
And they were all faith-based organizations?
Yes.
All Christian or other faiths?
Oh no, we're multi-faith. So there is there's a mix in all of them.
Okay. You spoke about it somewhat in your essay on impartiality, but I'd like you to speak about it again. As you were helping the group come together and merge, how did you have to exercise impartiality in bringing that group together, and also as executive director over the group?
So it was twofold. The impartiality came in because each of those groups represented some sort of faith leader, and that's a huge feat in itself to get faith leaders from different backgrounds. It's a huge feat to get faith leaders in the same background to agree and yield power. Now it's further complicated when you have someone that is a rabbi. That's very learned, etc., and then someone that might be representative of an indigenous tribe, or someone that is, because we like to say in our faith frames, no matter what it is, that we all we believed in the sanctity of people and the dignity of all, as long as I get to lead it, right? And so trying to bring them together and not have some of the prejudices and privileges that sometimes we don't know we operate in, where I feel like I need to yield, I need to have the floor and you need to yield to me. And although you spoke, I'm going to restate what you've already said, and I'm actually putting a little bit of a slant on it to my favor. So I had to kind of listen through and see what was going on, and to ensure that everyone had their voice heard and was not talked over or made to feel smaller or minimized. And I couldn't alienate those that were used to leading and running everything in the same process at the same time. And so specifically for my organizations, my board chair, and we've come a long way in 3, this is bad, I hope this isn't televised, but is this televised? I shouldn't say that. But anyway, yeah. So there are very, very intelligent, a lot of skill, a lot of ability, which sometimes can also mean lack of patience with someone that's still trying to find their way. And so trying to just ensure that everyone has time on the floor and are able to fully articulate what they need for who they're representing. So in the merger process, everyone, of course, wanted to know, we know who we are now, who will we be once we merge? And will I lose? That was the biggest battle, I think. What power will I lose? Because ultimately, 5 boards that were running the organizations had to agree to become 5 steering committees without the legal voice that they had before. And each of them got to send only 3 board members to the new merged board. So we have 1 board now over the whole organization. And everyone else is just kind of like a steering committee, not even the power of an advisory committee. They are the steering committee. And so we allow and we use them to direct what we work on, but the power of the organization comes through the faith leaders and the board of directors.
Okay.
And you mentioned as executive director, I just want to remind you, so all of this was not with me having any title. I was a board member in PACT, the one in San Joaquin County. It just was, I understand mergers, acquisitions, all that stuff. I understood that a lot stronger than I did social justice initially. And based on what they had taught me to date, it was like, if we need to wield more power, our best opportunity for doing so would be to bring these organizations together.
All right, thank you. So to answer your question, this is live streaming on the internet, but just my opinion, it didn't sound like you said anything offensive, just
Good.
sharing your experience. So tell me more about the Latino Community Foundation that you talked about in your application, and why you were asked to be a part of that particular program.
Quick
Yes.
time check. We have 4 minutes, 40 seconds.
Oh my goodness. Because I could talk about them all day and I won't. They have a deep, deep special place in my heart. When I was approached, like I said, by the Latino Community Foundation, Masha is the one that approached me. I kept receiving emails, and the program that they were naming seemed amazing. It talked about the power of the Latino and how much support that they needed, and by them being historically, coming from the perspective that there were things that they were not receiving the same amount of training and support for. And if you're going to be engaged with, mainstream, you need to make sure that you're coming and you're at the top of your game, and all of these things that you were missing. And I kept thinking, oh, that's an amazing program. I wish I wouldn't slow down, but I kept thinking, I wish they did something like that for Black folk. That is just, oh, I love that, right? And so I kept doing my job, and after so many more weeks, I'd get another invitation, and about being a part of this. I'm like, these people obviously don't know I'm Black, right? I'm not the Latino community. And then finally, because I kept thinking, is this spam mail, or are they really sending me something? Because sometimes you can't tell. So I had my admin, I said, call them, because at least I don't want them to keep reaching out to me, and I certainly don't want to feel like I'm not responding to my email. So I had my admin give them a call, and they were like, oh no, we know exactly who you are. This isn't spam mail, we're sending it to you. And they were sending it just because of the work that I do with the immigrant population community. And just ensuring that we are providing, the Health for All services. We have a Valley Watch network where people are able to call in when they're concerned about their rights, as it was relating to all of the ICE raids that was going on and what have you. And all of those things are near and dear to me, and things that my group was working actively on. And so basically they were like, no, and they were like, no, we want you as part of this, because it's in our best interest that you're providing your best service, and that we have worked to hone your skills as well. And so I went through an 18-month program with the Latino Community Foundation, the only Black person there. And they didn't try, what I love about them is they didn't try to adjust or shift and say, we're here for our heritage. Oh, and for the Black, no, they were unapologetically in support of their community. And I got to benefit by them bringing in all of their experts that they did, all of the coaching through Google and through some amazing sponsors and coaches that they had. I learned things that I never would have. And last thing I want to say about them, what I loved about them is what they do is provide true feedback. If you presented something and it sucked, it just did. It was like, they'd say it with love, but it was like, yeah, no, Pastor Trena, I've seen you do better. Let's do that. I'm like, I love this, true feedback. Yes, let me fix it. Okay. So anyway, that's the Latino Community Foundation. They're an amazing organization, and I got a chance to be a part of their program.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Mr. Dawson, the time is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, still, Pastor Trena. I wanted to follow up on one of the questions. I can't remember which panelist, but you were talking about your time at AT&T. You were a manager, and not only that, you were a trainer of managers, correct?
That's right.
And so, knowing what you know about the job of the commission, could I ask you to put your management training hat back on, and what would you be telling your fellow commissioners that would be important to know as they manage the work of the commission?
Yeah. I'd be telling them to share their learnings, articulate, share, speak out their experiences. I would imagine that whatever we are experiencing together would hit each of us differently from a different perspective. And I think that we can um, kind of multiply that learning when it's shared across. We used to do with my managers, I used to have every morning, just a quick 10, 15 minutes. What's our game plan for today? What did we learn? What needs to shift? That kind of thing. That's from a call center perspective when we did that. I would pull them all together on a conference call or what have you to say, how do we need to adjust in the moment? Now, from that, a lot of things happen. Of course, you will learn new things, et cetera. But beyond that, you get an opportunity to adjust thinking, attitudes, how you want to approach the day, so that you're not way later checking in with someone, figuring out that someone had a breakthrough moment months ago that could have benefited the entire team that just didn't think it was important enough to talk about. So that was big because when you're managing people that are already very self-sufficient, et cetera, there aren't a whole lot of hand-holding things you need to do. But what we do forget to do is to check in and share the incremental gains as we're moving.
Thank you. Can you tell me a bit more about your transition from being a corporate executive to being a pastor and also community organizer?
Yeah. Traumatic almost. I was a lover of the corporate world, absolutely. If you allow me to say from my faith frame, it really was a God thing only that allowed me to walk away in 25 years. I'm not old enough to have retired. I did not get a buyout package or what have you. I was at the top of my game, walked away with lots of amazing commendations and awards and what have you. But I knew that while I was going around and helping others be better at what they were doing, my husband, meanwhile, was pastoring back at home. And I was also trying to help build that work. We started our organization, our church, I'll say, with just my family. Back in '95. We currently have 12 churches. And at that time, when I was still working for ATT, I was helping them build, and I felt like I was giving the leftover to the ministry that he was trying to build. And very much love my husband. We've been married 43 years, and he's a great guy and all that. So it got to be kind of oh man, where should I be spending my time? And I decided to just really, well, not I so much decided, I really felt led and called to walk away from the job that I had to be able to build this ministry that he was doing. And I really expected to kind of suffer for Jesus, be really sad about it. And one of the miracle things that occurred is that when I did walk away, my VP and everyone, they were sure that another headhunter, because that was something that would happen frequently, is a headhunter would come to try to get me to work for someone else. And they were like, you sure you're not going? I'm like, no, I'm going to work for my husband at the church. I really am going to do that. So it blew everybody away, including me. I just felt it was the right thing to do. I walked away from it. That heaviness that I expected never really did occur because I moved right into teaching now people that were coming in from, people that weren't part of churches before, that were coming in now needing to be in leadership, but really not knowing how to lead. They had a heart for wanting to do this different work within the church and was making some of the typical mistakes a brand new manager or leader would make. So there I went right back into training again, teaching people how to interact, how to work with others, how to be flexible, how to get the best out of them, not what you want. What are they? People are already crafted and shaped to do some things. How do you help them be their best? And so that's what we were doing. And the ministry began to grow from us, into the largest we were 600. And then we moved a building. So we're about almost 400, so we lost a couple of people in a different process. I'll talk about that later. No, I won't. But anyway, that's a different thing that happened. But in that, as we were growing from just us to all of these other people and then birthing out all of these other churches and what have you, that's what I think, back to the woman I told you, Amelia Adams, part of what got her attention. And she started talking to me about this organizing group. Faith in Action is a nationwide group. And so she started talking about, you need to be a part of this, right? And I did not understand her frame, her approach. So she came to me a couple of different times, and finally I agreed to go to a meeting. And when I went to the meeting about who do you love, and that's how we typically start out to see, who do you want, have passion to fight for, and all of those things. I didn't get it. I felt like they were moving too slow. I went to one meeting. Whew, I did that. This Amelia person, I loved her. I did it. I'm done. And she's like, now I need you to come back to another meeting. And I'm like, oh Lord, no one has time for this. Anyway, to answer your question, I went back to a couple of more meetings. Didn't get it till I ended up in a national meeting. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. All faith institutions should be doing this. So that's how I got involved. I came back and I kind of moved and stuff, created a plan on the plane back home for just, in my mind at the time, a social justice ministry within our church. And then from there is when I learned about the organizations thinking if they should merge and all of that. And then I ended up being a part of it, which is why I wasn't expecting to be the executive director. I was still just working at the church. And they were like, nope, the way you put that together, we need you to be a part of this process to apply for executive director. So there was, I said it that way because I had to still go through a process with a few other people that were in running. But ultimately I ended up being the executive director. So that was the transition. It's kind of not a direct line.
So it was your work in ministry, your pastoral role, which then brought you into contact with these other community groups.
Yes.
Are you originally from Stockton? Have you always lived in the Valley?
No, sir. I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in Richmond, California. I've been in Stockton since '95.
I see. But these groups that I'm taking it from Faith in the Valley, these are all Central Valley organizations.
These groups.
I'm sorry. The five groups that became Faith in the Valley, they're all based in the Central Valley.
Yes, from Bakersfield to Stockton. Yes.
So my question is about the perspective of the Central Valley and the importance, or whether I'm going to assume that you think it's important that the Central Valley be represented on the commission. Could the interests of the Central Valley be recognized, be understood by folks, say, south of the Tehachapi's or on the northern coast? Does it take a Central Valley person to understand the issues of the Central Valley?
I strongly believe it does. The Central Valley is very different. We have the same conversation in the work that I'm doing currently. Coming out of the Bay Area is very much more involved politically. It's an easy thing to say, in my work frequently they say, okay, well, what is everyone talking about in the Central Valley? What issues are important for them? And it would be like, no issue. No, I mean, the priorities are so many, so great in the Central Valley that there is no one issue that you can come. Bay Area, hands down, housing. It would be housing, first of all. And everyone knows how to participate. It's easy to say, we're getting ready to organize around an issue, and in a couple of phone calls, somebody has heard of it or has participated before. The Central Valley has such a low participation of civic engagement that it makes it its own issue, number one. Beyond that, the priorities, the issues between the environmental concerns in water and in the air because of being in the valley, the immigrant population because of being in the valley, the conservative kind of, we speak of the Central Valley. Well, it's disrespectful. So I was going to say, we talk about the Central Valley almost like Alabama, right? And so it's very different than the Bay Area, very different than Southern California. Again, civically engaged. Southern California has different types of issues, but the Central Valley stands out. And even in some of our coalition spaces, they frequently will speak in funders. Let's go there. The funders will typically speak about representing the Southern California and even or the Northern California. Central California seems to be an afterthought, an add-on, and like, oh yeah, well, yeah, that includes them too. And frequently the conversations does not include Central Valley, not from a Central Valley frame, other than to just understand what holds North and South together.
I understand. Thank you. That answered my question. I believe those were all my follow-ups. Mr. Chair, I have no further follow-ups. If any of the panel members have any further follow-ups?
Ms. Dickinson, any follow-up questions?
I do not have any follow-up questions.
Mr. Belknap, any follow-up questions?
None here.
I have no follow-up questions, Mr. Dawson.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is our time remaining in the 90?
11 minutes, 15 seconds.
Thank you. Pastor Trena, with the time remaining, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to make a closing statement to the panel if you wish.
Yes, I wish, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for just the innovation and being able to continue in the process. I want to close by saying that I am looking forward to an opportunity of serving on the commission. And I'm also looking forward to whoever serves on it. I believe the process is set up to get the very best people that are here that'll be able to serve California. I've done more research about redistricting and understanding the maps that has to be drawn, et cetera. And so I'm confident in the process that you all have gone through to narrow it down, that if it's me, I'm going to be excited about it. If it's someone else, I'm like, yeah, they did that. I trust that the questions that you asked will yield the right result. So I'll just close by saying it's been an amazing experience. I thank you for it. I hope I get the opportunity to go on the ride, the journey, and I just trust the process regardless of what happens. So I just want to say thank you.
And thank you, Pastor Trena, for taking the time to speak with us today. Our next interview is scheduled for 1:15 p.m., so we will be in recess until 1:14 p.m.